Maria Gonzalez wiped her brow with the back of her hand and leaned on her mop, taking a moment to catch her breath. The community center's main hall gleamed under the fluorescent lights, nearly finished after 3 hours of scrubbing. At 56, her body reminded her daily that cleaning wasn't getting any easier, but jobs weren't exactly lining up for someone with her limited resume. Besides, the Oak Ridge Community Center had been good to her over the 8 years she'd worked there. The staff treated her with respect, which was more than she could say for some of her previous employers. She glanced at the large clock on the wall. Just past 4 in the afternoon. The center would be closing in a couple of hours, and she still had the music room to tackle. Maria gathered her cleaning cart and pushed it down the hallway, her rubber-soled shoes squeaking against the freshly mopped floor. The music room had been buzzing with activity all week. Everyone was talking about the new grand piano that had been delivered for the upcoming charity gala. The annual event brought together the wealthiest families in town to raise money for music education in underprivileged schools. Oh, the irony wasn't lost on Maria. She'd been one of those kids once, dreaming of music lessons but making do with whatever scraps of musical education came her way. As she pushed open the door to the music room, her breath caught in her throat. There it stood in the corner, gleaming black and majestic under a beam of late-afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. The Steinway grand piano was even more beautiful than people had described. Maria parked her cart by the door and found herself walking toward the instrument as if pulled by an invisible string. Careful with that one, Maria. It costs more than both our yearly salaries combined. Maria jumped at the voice and turned to see Beth, the event coordinator, standing in the doorway with a clipboard in hand. A woman in her 30s with perfectly styled hair and a perpetually busy demeanor. Beth was nice enough, but always seemed to be looking through Maria rather than at her. I wasn't going to touch it, Maria said quickly, stepping back from the piano. Just admiring it. Beth walked into the room, heels clicking on the hardwood floor. It's quite something, isn't it? The best money can buy. The pianist they've hired for the gala is flying in from New York. Apparently he won't play anything else. Maria nodded, her eyes still drawn to the elegant curve of the piano's lid. It's beautiful. Beth glanced from Maria to the piano and a small, amused smile appeared on her face. You know what, Maria? Why don't you try it out? What? Maria's eyes widened. The piano. Go ahead and play something for us, Beth said, her tone light and teasing. Who knows, maybe you're a secret virtuoso, and we can save on the performer's fee. From the doorway came a snicker. 2 of the administrative assistants had appeared, coffee cups in hand, apparently on their afternoon break. Oh yes, let's hear a tune, Maria, one of them called out, not unkindly but with clear amusement in her voice. Maria felt heat rising to her cheeks. She knew they weren't being deliberately cruel, but the assumption that someone like her, a cleaning lady with calloused hands and a simple education, couldn't possibly have musical talent stung more than they could know. I should finish cleaning, Maria said quietly, turning back to her cart. Beth waved a dismissive hand. I'm just teasing. But seriously, be extra careful with that piano. Mr. Reynolds will have a fit if there's even a fingerprint on it. She checked something on her clipboard. The gala committee is meeting upstairs. I better join them. Don't forget to vacuum the stage area too. With that, Beth and the others left, their conversation already shifting to details about the upcoming event as their voices faded down the hallway. Maria stood alone in the room, the silence ringing in her ears. She looked down at her hands, rough and red from years of harsh cleaning chemicals. These weren't the hands of a pianist anymore. Not for a long time. She turned back to the piano, memories flooding her mind. Her grandmother's small home in Mexico, the upright piano that took up nearly an entire wall of their tiny living room, the smell of her grandmother's cooking mixing with the sound of music as little Maria practiced scales. Her grandmother had been a music teacher back in Mexico City before moving to their small town. She'd recognized Maria's natural talent when she was just 4 years old, and had poured everything she knew into her granddaughter. By the time Maria was 12, she could play pieces that made adults in their church congregation shake their heads in wonder. You have a gift from God, her grandmother would say, her weathered hand squeezing Maria's shoulders. Never forget that. But life had other plans. When her parents died in a car accident, 16-year-old Maria had to abandon her music studies to help support her younger siblings. Piano lessons gave way to cleaning jobs and night shifts at the local diner. Her grandmother passed away a year later, and the old piano was sold to pay for the funeral. The years passed in a blur of hard work and sacrifice. Maria married young to a kind man who worked at the local factory. They had a good life together until his heart gave out 10 years ago. Their 2 children were grown now with families of their own in different states. They called when they could, but visits were rare. Maria realized she had been standing still for several minutes, lost in memories. She shook her head and turned back to her cleaning cart. The music room wouldn't clean itself, and daydreaming about what might have been was a luxury she couldn't afford. As she dusted the shelves lined with music books and cleaned the windows, Maria kept stealing glances at the piano. The room grew darker as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the floor. She should turn on more lights, but something about the soft golden glow felt sacred, like being in church. After finishing the rest of the room, Maria finally approached the piano again. She carefully dusted its surface, making sure not to press too hard on the polished wood. The fallboard covering the keys was closed. Her hand hovered over it for a moment. Just one look, she thought. Just to see the keys. Gently, she lifted the fallboard, revealing the pristine white and black keys beneath. They seemed to glow in the dim light, inviting her touch. Maria glanced toward the door. The hallway outside was quiet. Most of the staff had gone home, and the evening programs wouldn't start for another hour. Before she could talk herself out of it, Maria slipped onto the bench, careful not to let her uniform snag on anything. The seat felt both foreign and familiar beneath her. How long had it been since she'd sat at a piano? 20 years? 30? She didn't touch the keys at first, just positioned her hands above them in the way her grandmother had taught her, feeling the muscle memory return like an old friend. Then slowly she lowered her right hand and pressed a single key, a middle C. The note rang out, pure and clear, making her heart skip a beat. The sound was nothing like the tinny upright she'd grown up with, or the electronic keyboard her husband had bought her for their 5th anniversary, which now collected dust in her apartment closet. This was rich, resonant, alive. Maria played another note, then another. A simple scale ascending and descending. Her fingers remembered even if they were stiffer now, less agile. She played a simple melody her grandmother had taught her as her very first piece. Para Elisa, Beethoven's Für Elise, as she later learned it was properly called. The music room filled with the gentle notes, and Maria felt something inside her chest unlock. A door she had closed long ago creaking open. She played the piece all the way through, making a few mistakes but finding her way. When she finished, she sat in silence, tears welling in her eyes. Then, almost without thinking, her hands began to move again. This time, they found the opening notes of Chopin's Nocturne Op. 9 No. 2, the last piece her grandmother had taught her, the one she had practiced obsessively in the weeks after her parents' death, finding solace in its melancholy beauty. Maria closed her eyes, letting her fingers remember the way. The piece was challenging with its delicate ornaments and expressive phrasing, but somehow her hands knew what to do. It wasn't perfect. Decades of neglect couldn't be overcome in a moment. But the heart of the music was there, flowing through her like a river breaking through a dam. She was so lost in the music that she didn't hear the door open or notice the figure standing in the shadowy doorway. She didn't see the widening eyes or the dropped coffee cup that spilled across the floor. She knew only the piano beneath her fingers and the music that had lived inside her all these years, waiting patiently to be set free again. As the final notes faded, Maria opened her eyes and gasped. Standing in the doorway was Robert Chen, the center's music director, staring at her with an expression of complete astonishment on his face. I'm sorry, Maria stammered, rising quickly from the bench. I didn't mean to. Where did you learn to play like that? Robert asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maria looked down at her feet, embarrassment washing over her. My grandmother taught me a long time ago. I'm sorry if I wasn't supposed to touch the piano. Not supposed to. Robert shook his head in disbelief. He stepped into the room, seemingly forgetting about the coffee spreading across the floor behind him. Maria, that was Chopin's Nocturne. You were playing Chopin? She nodded, confused by his reaction. Yes, it was my grandmother's favorite. She taught it to me before she died. Robert ran a hand through his graying hair, looking from Maria to the piano and back again. I've been teaching music for 20 years. I've worked with students from Juilliard. What I just heard? He paused, searching for words. There was something in your playing, a raw emotion that technical training can't teach. Maria didn't know how to respond. This had to be some kind of joke, like Beth's earlier teasing, but Robert wasn't laughing. He was looking at her as if seeing her for the first time, though they had exchanged polite hellos in the hallways for years. The charity gala is in 3 weeks, he said slowly, a new idea clearly forming in his mind. Would you? He stopped, seeming to reconsider, then pressed on with growing excitement. Maria, would you consider playing at the gala? The question hung in the air between them, as impossible as it was unexpected. Maria opened her mouth to refuse, to explain all the reasons why this was a ridiculous suggestion. But something stopped her. Perhaps the memory of her grandmother's voice, still echoing after all these years. You have a gift from God. Never forget that. And for the first time in decades, standing in the fading light of the music room with her hands still warm from the keys of the grand piano, Maria wondered if perhaps it wasn't too late to remember. Maria stood frozen, Robert Chen's words hanging in the air between them. Play at the gala? Her? The suggestion was so unexpected, so far removed from her reality that she couldn't quite grasp it. Mr. Chen, I think you misunderstood. I'm just the cleaning lady, she finally said, gesturing to her gray uniform with the community center's logo stitched on the pocket. Robert shook his head firmly. No, Maria, what I heard wasn't just anything. That was the playing of someone with genuine talent and deep feeling for the music. He walked over to the piano, his shoes leaving wet footprints from the spilled coffee he'd forgotten about. Do you know how many technically perfect pianists I've heard who couldn't convey half the emotion you just did? All the training in the world can't teach what you have naturally. Maria felt her cheeks grow warm. No one had praised her playing since her grandmother passed away. It's been many years since I played regularly. I made lots of mistakes. Technique can be polished with practice, Robert said, waving away her concern. But the soul in your playing, that's something special. Maria glanced at her watch. I need to finish cleaning. The evening program starts soon. Of course, Robert said, seeming to remember himself. He looked down and noticed the coffee spreading across the floor. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. He hurried to grab some paper towels from Maria's cart. Please let me, Maria said, taking the towels from him and kneeling to wipe up the spill. Robert watched her for a moment. Maria, I'm serious about the gala. Just think about it, okay? We could rehearse after your shifts before the center opens, whenever works for you. Maria kept her eyes on the floor as she cleaned, not trusting herself to look up. Her heart was racing with a mixture of fear and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. I'll think about it, she said quietly. Knowing that was easier than explaining all the reasons why it was impossible, Robert seemed to sense her reluctance. Just one more thing before I go, he said. Could you play something else for me? Anything you remember? Maria hesitated, then stood up with the coffee-soaked paper towels in her hands. I should really finish cleaning, Mr. Chen. Robert, please, he said. And just one short piece, please. There was such genuine interest in his eyes that Maria found herself setting aside the wet towels and walking back to the piano. She sat down, took a deep breath, and began to play again. This time she chose a simpler piece, a Bach minuet she had learned as a child. Her fingers moved more confidently now, finding their way through the familiar patterns. When she finished, Robert was smiling broadly. Beautiful, he said. Think about the gala, Maria. This is a gift that deserves to be shared. After he left, Maria finished cleaning the music room in a daze, her mind spinning with possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to consider for decades. By the time she clocked out that evening, she had convinced herself that Robert's offer wasn't serious. He had been caught up in the moment, impressed by the novelty of hearing the cleaning lady play classical music. By tomorrow he would come to his senses, but the next morning, as Maria was mopping the hallway outside the administrative offices, Robert spotted her and changed direction, heading straight for her. Good morning, Maria, he said cheerfully.
Have you thought about our conversation?
Maria glanced around, worried that others might overhear. Mr. Chen, Robert, I appreciate your kindness, but I don't think it's a good idea. Why not? He asked, genuinely puzzled. How could she explain? The fear of embarrassing herself, of being laughed at by the wealthy patrons, of failing after allowing herself to hope again. It was too much. The gala is for professional musicians, not cleaning staff. she said finally. The gala is for raising money for music education, Robert corrected gently. What better way to demonstrate the power of music than to showcase someone who's kept the passion alive, despite not having formal opportunities? Before Maria could respond, Beth turned the corner with her ever-present clipboard. Robert, just the person I was looking for. We need to finalize the program for the gala. The committee wants to know if you've confirmed with the pianist from New York. Robert glanced at Maria, then back to Beth. Actually, I'm exploring a different option for the piano performance. Beth raised an eyebrow. Oh, anyone I know? Robert hesitated, and Maria felt her stomach tighten with anxiety. It's a surprise, he said finally. Trust me on this one, Beth. I think it will make the gala truly memorable. Beth didn't look convinced, but she made a note on her clipboard. Well, don't keep me in suspense too long. We need to print the programs next week. She continued down the hallway, her heels clicking against the floor. When she was out of earshot, Maria released the breath she'd been holding. See, this is exactly what I'm afraid of. No one will take this seriously. They will when they hear you play, Robert insisted. Look, we don't have to decide about the gala right this minute. But would you at least agree to play for me again? Maybe during your lunch break? I have access to some sheet music that might help refresh your memory. Maria thought about the half hour she usually spent eating a sandwich alone in the break room, reading worn paperback novels from the public library. I suppose that wouldn't hurt, she said cautiously. Robert beamed. Excellent. Meet me in the music room at noon. Maria nodded, already wondering if she was making a huge mistake. When lunchtime came, Maria found herself sitting once again at the grand piano, this time with Robert beside her, pulling sheet music from a leather portfolio. I brought some Chopin, since you played him so beautifully yesterday, and some Bach and Mozart as well. Let's see what feels comfortable for you. For the next 20 minutes, Maria played snippets of various pieces while Robert listened intently, occasionally making suggestions about tempo or expression. His guidance was gentle, respectful, so different from what she had expected. Your technique is a bit rusty, but that's to be expected after so long, he said. But your instincts are remarkably good. You have a natural feel for the emotional content of the music. My grandmother used to say music is just another language, Maria said, surprising herself by sharing the memory. She said it was the language of feelings that couldn't be put into words. Robert nodded enthusiastically. Your grandmother was a wise woman. That's exactly right. As their impromptu session came to an end, Maria realized she had enjoyed herself more than she had in years. There was something profoundly satisfying about reconnecting with this part of herself that had been dormant for so long. Same time tomorrow? Robert asked hopefully. Maria found herself nodding before she could overthink it. These lunchtime sessions continued for the next week. Word began to spread among the center's staff that Maria could play, though most seemed to treat it as an amusing curiosity rather than something serious. She overheard whispers as she went about her cleaning duties. Did you hear about Maria? Apparently she can play piano. No way. Like chopsticks or something? No, like classical music. Shen's been giving her lessons during lunch. That's unexpected. The comments weren't mean-spirited, just surprised, but they made Maria feel self-conscious nonetheless. She began to regret agreeing to the lessons, especially when she noticed some of the staff peeking into the music room during her practice sessions, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. 10 days after Maria's first performance on the Steinway, Robert brought up the gala again. You've made incredible progress in just a week, he said as they sat side by side on the piano bench. I really think you're ready to start preparing a piece for the gala. Maria twisted her hands in her lap. I don't know, Robert. It's one thing to play for you, but performing in front of all those people. What if we had a small trial run? Robert suggested. Just a few people, me, maybe the director of the center, one or two others. If you're comfortable with that, we can think about the next step. It seemed like a reasonable compromise. Okay, Maria agreed cautiously. But just a few people. Robert smiled. How about tomorrow afternoon? The center closes early on Fridays, so we could use the main hall around 4. Maria nodded, ignoring the flutter of anxiety in her stomach. The next day, Maria finished her cleaning duties early and changed out of her uniform into the one nice outfit she had brought with her, a simple blue blouse and black pants that she kept in her locker for emergencies. She brushed her hair and applied a touch of lipstick, trying to calm her nerves. When she walked into the main hall at 4 o'clock, she stopped short. Robert was there, along with the center's director as promised. But so was Beth and the entire gala committee. 8 people in total, all dressed in business attire, all watching her expectantly. "There she is," Robert said warmly, gesturing for her to come forward. "Everyone, this is Maria Gonzalez." Maria wanted to turn and run, but her feet carried her forward as if on autopilot. "Maria, I hope you don't mind, but when I mentioned you're playing to Director Wilson, he was so intrigued that he wanted to bring in the committee to hear for themselves," Robert explained, having the grace to look slightly apologetic. Director Wilson, a tall man with silver hair who normally only nodded to Maria in passing, stepped forward with his hand extended. "Ms. Gonzalez, Robert has been singing your praises. We're all very curious to hear you play." Maria shook his hand automatically, feeling as if she had stumbled into someone else's life. The grand piano had been moved to the center of the hall, its lid raised, gleaming under the lights. "What will you be playing for us today?" Beth asked, her tone professionally polite but with an underlying note of skepticism. Maria looked to Robert, panic rising in her throat. "Chopin's Nocturne," Robert supplied smoothly. "The piece you played that first afternoon." Maria nodded mutely and walked to the piano. As she sat down, she saw the committee members exchange glances. They clearly weren't expecting much. A cleaning lady playing classical music was a novelty, perhaps even slightly amusing, but nothing more. She placed her hands on the keys, noticing how they trembled slightly. She closed her eyes, trying to find her center, trying to remember why she loved music in the first place. In her mind, she heard her grandmother's voice. "Music is a gift from the heart to the heart." Don't think about the notes. Think about what you want to say. Maria took a deep breath and began to play. The first few notes were hesitant, but as she continued, something shifted. She forgot about the committee, forgot about her fears, forgot about the years of silence. There was only the music, the gentle, yearning melody that had comforted her during the darkest days of her life. When she played the final note, the hall was completely silent. Maria opened her eyes and turned hesitantly toward her small audience. The committee members sat motionless, their expressions transformed from polite interest to complete astonishment. Beth's clipboard had slipped from her fingers and lay forgotten on the floor. Director Wilson was blinking rapidly as if fighting back tears. Robert was the first to break the silence, beginning to clap enthusiastically. The others joined in, the applause echoing through the hall. "My God," Director Wilson said, his voice thick with emotion. "That was extraordinary." Beth stood up, retrieving her clipboard with shaking hands. "I don't understand," she said, looking from Maria to Robert and back again. "How is this possible?" "Talent doesn't always follow the expected path, Beth," Robert said quietly. Director Wilson approached the piano, his expression serious. "Ms. Gonzalez, Maria, I think we've found our featured pianist for this year's gala." Maria sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the calendar on her wall. 2 weeks until the gala, 14 days to prepare for something she never imagined doing again. The thought made her stomach twist into knots. After her performance for the committee, everything had happened so quickly. Director Wilson had immediately announced that she would be the featured pianist at the gala. Beth had shifted from skepticism to enthusiastic planning, already thinking about how to present Maria's story in the program. And Robert had beamed with pride, as if discovering her talent was his greatest achievement. Maria had stood there nodding and smiling weakly, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Only when she got home to her small apartment that evening did the reality sink in. She was going to play at a formal event in front of hundreds of people, wealthy donors, music lovers, probably even some professional musicians. People who would judge her, who would expect perfection. She glanced at the clock. 30 a.m. She'd barely slept. In 3 hours, she needed to be at the community center for her regular cleaning shift. But today would be different. Director Wilson had adjusted her schedule so she could clean in the morning and practice piano in the afternoon. "We need to make the most of these 2 weeks," he'd said, as if her transformation from cleaning lady to pianist was now the center's top priority. Maria got up and made herself a cup of coffee. Her tiny kitchen was spotless. Cleaning was second nature to her now, both at work and at home. Through the thin walls, she could hear her neighbor's television already on, the morning news providing background noise for another day. As she sipped her coffee, Maria's eyes fell on the old photograph on her refrigerator. Her grandmother sitting at the upright piano, a much younger Maria standing beside her, both smiling at the camera. It was one of the few pictures she had from that time. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. Music is not just in the fingers, Maria. It's in the heart. Would her grandmother be proud of her now? Or would she be disappointed that Maria had let her talent gather dust for so many years? With a sigh, Maria put her coffee cup in the sink and began getting ready for work. Whatever doubts she had made a commitment. She would do her best, even if her best wasn't good enough for the gala audience. When she arrived at the community center, the first person she saw was Beth, already busy at the front desk despite the early hour. "Maria," Beth called out, waving her over. "I was hoping to catch you this morning. I've been thinking about your performance." Maria approached cautiously, still not entirely comfortable with this new dynamic between them. "We need to decide what you'll wear for the gala," Beth said, looking Maria up and down as if seeing her for the first time. "Do you have an evening gown?" Maria almost laughed. "No, I don't have an evening gown." Beth nodded as if this was exactly what she expected. "Not to worry. I have a friend who owns a boutique downtown. I'm sure we can find something suitable, perhaps a classic black dress, simple but elegant." The thought of trying on fancy dresses made Maria even more anxious. "That's very kind, but it's no trouble at all," Beth interrupted. "You're representing the center now. We want you to look the part." She scribbled something on a sticky note. "Here's the address. Can you go tomorrow afternoon? I've already called ahead." Maria took the note, not knowing how to refuse. "Thank you," she said quietly. Beth smiled, a genuine smile, not the polite one she usually offered Maria. "This is going to be something special. Maria, I can feel it." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "The committee has already heard from several major donors who are intrigued by the mystery pianist we've promised. Ticket sales have increased by 30%. Maria felt a new weight settle on her shoulders. Not only did she have to perform well for her own sake, but now the success of the fundraiser seemed to depend on her too. She excused herself and hurried to the supply closet to gather her cleaning materials. Work was familiar territory, something she knew how to do well. For the next few hours, she lost herself in the routine of mopping, dusting and scrubbing, trying not to think about pianos or galas or evening gowns. At noon, she took her lunch break in the staff room as usual. She had just unwrapped her sandwich when the door opened, and two of the administrative assistants walked in. They paused when they saw her, then exchanged glances before coming to sit at her table. "Mind if we join you?" asked Diane, the older of the two. Maria shook her head, surprised. Though always polite, these women had never sought out her company before. "So," said Carly, the younger assistant, leaning forward eagerly. "Is it true? Are you really playing at the gala?" Maria nodded, taking a small bite of her sandwich. "That's amazing," Diane said. "I heard you used to be some kind of prodigy. Is that right?" "No, nothing like that," Maria said quickly. "My grandmother taught me when I was young. That's all." "But you play classical music," Carly pressed. "Like the complicated stuff? Mozart and all that?" "Some Chopin, some Bach," Maria said, uncomfortable with their sudden interest. "I'm very rusty." "Not from what I heard," said Diane. "People are saying you made Director Wilson cry." Maria nearly choked on her sandwich. "That's not true," she protested. "Well, Tina from HR said his eyes were definitely wet," Carly insisted. "And Beth hasn't stopped talking about you. It's all very exciting." Exciting wasn't the word Maria would have chosen. Terrifying seemed more accurate. "We'll definitely be there to cheer you on," Diane said, patting Maria's hand. "The whole staff is planning to attend. Director Wilson is giving everyone complimentary tickets." The thought of all her colleagues watching her perform made Maria's anxiety spike even higher. Until now, they had seen her only as the quiet woman who cleaned the center. What if she failed spectacularly in front of them all? After lunch, Maria reported to the music room for her first official practice session with Robert. He was already there, sorting through sheet music at a small table. "Ah, Maria, right on time," he said cheerfully. "I've been thinking about your repertoire for the gala. The Chopin Nocturne is perfect for starters, but I think we should add one or two more pieces to showcase your range." Maria set down her bag. "I'm not sure I can learn new pieces in just 2 weeks." "Not entirely new," Robert clarified. "I was thinking of pieces you might have played before that we could refresh." What else did your grandmother teach you? Maria thought back to those years at the old upright piano. Some Mozart sonatas, a few Bach preludes, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, though I never mastered the third movement. Robert's eyes lit up. The Moonlight would be perfect. We could do the first movement, which is more contemplative, and then follow with something more dynamic, perhaps a section from one of the Mozart sonatas. He sat down at the piano and patted the bench beside him. Let's start with the Chopin since you know it best. I'll make some notes on where we might refine the interpretation. For the next 2 hours, Maria worked on the nocturne under Robert's guidance. His teaching style was gentle but precise, focusing on small details, the timing of a trill, the weight of a chord, the slight hesitation before a key phrase. Music is like storytelling, he explained. The notes are just the words. It's the pauses, the emphasis, the flow that creates the meaning. It reminded her so much of her grandmother's teaching that Maria found herself blinking back tears at one point. Are you all right? Robert asked, concerned. Maria nodded, embarrassed. It's just been a long time since I thought about music this way. Robert smiled sympathetically. It's coming back to you, though. I can tell. By the end of the session, Maria's fingers were sore, but her mind was buzzing. Despite her anxiety, there was a part of her that had missed this. The challenge of shaping a piece of music. The satisfaction when a difficult passage finally clicked. As she was gathering her things to leave, Robert handed her a small USB drive. Recordings of the pieces we discussed, he explained. Listen to them when you can. It helps to hear different interpretations. Maria took the drive, touched by his thoughtfulness. Thank you. I'll try to practice at home, but I don't have a piano. You don't? Robert looked surprised. That complicates things. Wait here a moment. He disappeared from the room, returning 5 minutes later with a set of keys. These are for the side entrance and the music room, he said, placing them in her hand. You can come in early before your shift or stay late after hours to practice. Just make sure to lock up when you leave. Maria stared at the keys. Is that allowed? Director Wilson approved it. Like I said, we're all invested in your success now. The following days fell into a new rhythm. Maria would arrive at the center at 6 in the morning, 2 hours before her shift to practice on the Steinway. Then she would clean until noon, have a quick lunch, and spend the afternoon practicing with Robert. In the evenings, after the center closed, she would sometimes return for another hour of practice before heading home. The pieces were coming together better than she had expected. Her fingers were remembering their old skills, becoming more agile with each day of practice. The music was returning to her like an old friend, familiar yet somehow new, as she brought her adult experiences to pieces she had learned as a girl. Word about the cleaning lady pianist had spread beyond the community center. A local newspaper reporter had called, wanting to do a feature story before the gala. Maria had politely declined, not ready for that level of attention. But she couldn't avoid the curious glances from people attending classes at the center, or the way conversations would stop when she walked into a room. 8 days before the gala, Maria went to the boutique Beth had recommended. The owner, a stylish woman named Gloria, greeted her warmly. Beth told me all about you, she said, leading Maria through racks of elegant clothing. What an inspiring story. Now let's find you something that makes you feel like the artist you are. Maria had never thought of herself as an artist. A worker, a mother, a widow, a survivor, yes. But artist? That was a word for people who had devoted their lives to their craft, not for someone who had abandoned her music for decades. Gloria selected several dresses for Maria to try on. The first few felt wrong. Too flashy, too youthful, too unlike anything she would normally wear. But the last one, a simple midnight blue gown with 3/4 sleeves and a modest neckline, made Gloria clap her hands in delight. That's the one, she declared. Classic, elegant, and it fits you perfectly. Maria turned in front of the mirror, hardly recognizing herself. The dress was beautiful, more expensive than anything she'd ever owned. I can't afford this, she said quietly. Gloria waved away her concern. Beth didn't tell you? The center is covering the cost. It's part of the gala expenses. Maria felt a rush of conflicting emotions, gratitude, discomfort at being an expense, and a strange sense that she was living someone else's life. When she returned to the center wearing her usual cleaning uniform, the dress carefully hung in a garment bag. Robert was waiting for her in the music room. His face was serious. "We need to talk," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "The director of the music school that will benefit from the gala wants to attend a rehearsal. He's curious about our discovery." Maria felt her heart rate quicken. "When?" "Tomorrow afternoon. Just a small audience, him, the director, myself, and maybe one or two others." It wasn't the first time Maria had played for a small group, but there was something different about being evaluated by a music school director, someone whose life was dedicated to identifying and nurturing talent. "What if he doesn't think I'm good enough?" she asked, voicing her deepest fear. Robert looked her in the eyes. "Maria, you need to understand something. You may not have had the training or opportunities that many pianists have, but what you have is special. Your playing has heart. It connects with people. That's rarer than you might think." His confidence in her was touching, but it didn't ease the butterflies in her stomach. As she practiced that afternoon, her mind kept wandering to the upcoming rehearsal, imagining critical eyes watching her every move. That night, Maria couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, replaying difficult passages in her mind, worrying about memory slips or technical mistakes. When her alarm went off at 4:30 a.m., she was already awake. She arrived at the center earlier than usual, hoping to get in extra practice before her cleaning duties began. As she unlocked the side door in the pre-dawn darkness, a strange sense of calm settled over her. Whatever happened today, whatever happened at the gala, she had rediscovered something precious that had been missing from her life for too long. The music room was silent and dark when she entered. Maria turned on a single lamp, casting soft light over the Steinway. She sat down at the bench, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play not Chopin or Beethoven or Mozart, but a simple melody her grandmother had composed, a lullaby that Maria had learned before anything else. As the gentle notes filled the empty room, Maria closed her eyes and let herself remember, not just the music, but the joy it had once brought her. And for the first time in many years, she allowed herself to imagine a future where music might have a place in her life again, regardless of what happened at tomorrow's rehearsal or next week's gala. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows of the community center's main hall, casting long rectangles of light across the polished floor. Maria sat at the piano, trying to ignore the small group of people seated in the front row. Robert stood nearby, offering an encouraging smile whenever their eyes met. Director Wilson sat next to a thin, gray-haired man with wire-rimmed glasses, who Maria knew must be Dr. Phillips, the director of the music school. Beth was there too, clipboard in hand as always, along with two other members of the gala committee. "Whenever you're ready, Ms. Gonzalez," Director Wilson said, his voice echoing slightly in the large room. Maria nodded, taking a deep breath. She had been practicing for hours that morning, going over and over the pieces until her fingers moved almost automatically. But now, with these important eyes watching her, she felt her confidence wavering. She placed her hands on the keys, closed her eyes for a moment, and began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne filled the hall, hesitant at first but growing stronger as Maria lost herself in the familiar melody. By the middle of the piece, she had nearly forgotten her audience, focusing only on the music, on making each phrase flow naturally into the next. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before Dr. Phillips spoke. "Very nice, Ms. Gonzalez," he said, his tone measured but not unkind. "Your interpretation is quite emotional. I understand you're largely self-taught?" "My grandmother taught me when I was young," Maria explained. "She was a music teacher in Mexico City." Dr. Phillips nodded. "And the Beethoven? Robert mentioned you're preparing the first movement of the Moonlight Sonata as well." Maria turned back to the piano, more nervous about the Beethoven than she had been about the Chopin. She had been practicing it for less time, and there were still passages that didn't feel completely secure under her fingers. Nevertheless, she began to play, trying to capture the quiet intensity of the piece. The triplet pattern flowed from her right hand while her left provided the steady pulse of the bass line. When she reached a difficult section in the middle, she slowed down slightly, concentrating on the notes. This time when she finished, Dr. Phillips leaned forward in his chair, studying her with newfound interest. "Your technique is unorthodox," he said, "but there's something genuine in your playing that's quite compelling. Tell me, have you ever had formal training?" Maria shook her head. "No, just what my grandmother taught me until I was 16. After that, I didn't play regularly until..." She glanced at Robert. Until recently. Remarkable, Dr. Phillips murmured. He turned to Director Wilson. She'll need more preparation, of course. But yes, I think this could be very special indeed. Director Wilson beamed as if Maria had just passed an important test. Excellent. Dr. Phillips has offered to work with you a few times before the gala, if you're amenable. He has a particular expertise in performance preparation. Maria looked at Dr. Phillips in surprise. You want to teach me? Guide you might be a better word, Dr. Phillips said with a small smile. You have your own voice at the piano. I wouldn't want to interfere with that. But there are some technical aspects we could refine in the next week to help you feel more secure. It was more than Maria had expected. Not just approval, but actual help from a professional musician. Thank you, she said, genuinely moved by his offer. I would appreciate that very much. The days that followed were even more intensive than before. Maria continued her regular practice sessions with Robert, but now added 3 special sessions with Dr. Phillips. His teaching style was more demanding than Robert's, focusing on technical details that Maria had never considered. Your hand position here, he would say, demonstrating at a second piano that had been brought into the music room. See how I keep my wrist flexible? That will help with the transition to the next chord. Or, try counting aloud while you play this passage. 1 and 2 and 3. Feel how the triplets fit against the quarter notes in the left hand. Sometimes his instructions seemed impossibly precise. The pedal should be changed exactly here, not a moment before or after. But when Maria followed his guidance, she was amazed at the difference it made in the sound. Beyond technique, Dr. Phillips talked about performance itself, how to prepare mentally, how to handle mistakes, how to connect with an audience. Never apologize with your body language, he advised. If you miss a note, and everyone does sometimes, don't grimace or shake your head. Just keep playing as if it was intentional. At one point, he asked Maria to play through her entire program without stopping, no matter what happened. The best preparation for a performance is to perform, he explained. Even if it's just for me. That run-through was difficult. Maria made several mistakes, losing her place in the Mozart sonata and having to improvise for a few measures until she found her way back. When she finished, she expected criticism, but Dr. Phillips simply nodded. Now do it again, he said. This time, imagine the hall is full of people. By the third run-through, Maria was exhausted but more confident. The pieces were becoming part of her, not just notes on a page, but music she could feel. You have a gift, Dr. Phillips told her as they ended their final session, 2 days before the gala. Not just for playing the notes, but for communicating through music. Don't be afraid to share that gift. The day before the gala, Maria was relieved of her cleaning duties entirely so she could rest and prepare. The center was buzzing with activity as staff and volunteers decorated the main hall, transforming it with flowers, lights, and elegant table settings. Maria watched from a distance, still not quite believing that she would be at the center of tomorrow's event. That afternoon, Beth insisted on a dress rehearsal with Maria in her gown, and the hall set up exactly as it would be for the performance. The midnight blue dress felt strange after a lifetime of practical clothes, but as Maria walked across the stage to the piano, she caught a glimpse of herself in a window reflection and almost didn't recognize the elegant woman looking back at her. You look lovely, Beth said, making a small adjustment to the dress's neckline. Now you'll enter from this door when Robert introduces you. Take your time walking to the piano. Remember to acknowledge the audience before you sit down. Maria nodded, trying to absorb all the instructions while managing her growing nervousness. The spotlight will follow you, Beth continued. We've positioned the piano so everyone will have a good view of your hands on the keys. Oh, and we've printed your bio in the program just as we discussed. The bio had been a point of contention. Beth had wanted to emphasize the rags to riches aspect of Maria's story. The cleaning lady discovered by chance and transformed into a pianist. Maria had insisted on something simpler that mentioned her grandmother's teaching and her lifelong love of music without dwelling on her occupation. As the rehearsal ended, Robert approached with a small velvet box. A gift from the committee, he said, opening it to reveal a delicate silver bracelet with a small piano charm. A token of appreciation for all your hard work. Maria blinked back tears. Everyone has been so kind. I don't know how to thank you all. Just play beautifully tomorrow, Robert said. That will be thanks enough. The morning of the gala, Maria woke early after a restless night. She had dreamed of playing in front of an endless crowd, her fingers suddenly too stiff to press the keys, the music escaping her. She shook off the dream and made herself a strong cup of coffee, trying to calm her nerves. As she dressed in comfortable clothes, she would change into her gown at the center later. Her phone rang. It was her daughter calling from Arizona. "Mom, I've been trying to reach you for days. Is everything okay? You usually call on Sundays." Maria realized with a jolt that she had been so consumed with piano practice that she'd forgotten their weekly call. "I'm fine, Teresa. Actually, I have some news." "News? What kind of news?" Her daughter's voice was instantly concerned. "Good news," Maria assured her. I'm playing piano at a charity event tonight." There was a pause on the line. "Piano, Mom? You haven't played in years." "I know. It's a long story." Maria briefly explained what had happened, how Robert had heard her playing and everything that followed. "Mom, that's amazing," Teresa exclaimed. "I had no idea you could play like that. Why didn't you ever tell us?" It was a fair question. Maria had rarely spoken to her children about her early life or her grandmother's teaching. Those memories had been too painful after she stopped playing. "It was a long time ago," she said simply. "I wish I could be there to hear you," Teresa said. "Can someone record it?" "I think Beth mentioned something about a video for the center's website," Maria said. "I'll send it to you if they do. Do you need anything? Are you nervous?" Maria smiled at her daughter's concern. "Yes, I'm nervous. But it's a good kind of nervous, I think. Dr. Phillips, he's the music school director who's been helping me, says that means I care about doing well." After saying goodbye to Teresa, Maria gathered her things and headed to the community center. The gala wouldn't begin until 7 p.m., but there were final rehearsals scheduled for the afternoon, and Beth wanted her there early to prepare. The center was already transformed when she arrived. The everyday community space had become something elegant and unfamiliar. Volunteers were adding final touches to the decorations, and caterers were setting up in the kitchen area. In the midst of all this activity, Maria made her way to the small office that had been designated as her dressing room. Beth was waiting for her, along with a young woman introduced as a professional hair and makeup artist. "We want you to feel special tonight," Beth explained. For the next hour, Maria sat still while the artist worked, transforming her usual simple appearance with subtle makeup and styling her gray-streaked hair into a sophisticated updo. When she finally looked in the mirror, Maria barely recognized herself. "What do you think?" Beth asked anxiously. "It's beautiful," Maria said honestly, "though I'm not sure it's me." Beth smiled. "Tonight, you're not just Maria the person. You're Maria the pianist. You're allowed to shine." As the afternoon progressed, Maria's nerves intensified. During the final rehearsal, she played adequately but felt disconnected from the music, too conscious of all the technical details Dr. Phillips had taught her. Afterward, Robert found her sitting alone in the music room, staring at her hands. "Pre-performance jitters?" he asked gently. Maria nodded. "I keep thinking about all the things that could go wrong. What if I forget the music? What if my hands shake too much to play? What if everyone is disappointed?" Robert sat down beside her. "Do you know why I stopped that afternoon when I heard you playing? It wasn't just because you were playing Chopin. It was because for a moment I forgot where I was. The music took me somewhere else, somewhere real and true." He placed a hand briefly on her shoulder. "That's a rare gift, Maria. Trust it." His words stayed with her as she changed into her gown and waited for the gala to begin. From her dressing room, she could hear the growing sounds of guests arriving, the murmur of conversation and occasional laughter. Beth checked on her periodically, bringing her water and providing updates on the evening's schedule. "The hall is nearly full," she reported excitedly during one visit. "And Dr. Phillips says several music critics from the city newspapers have shown up. Word has spread about our mystery pianist." Finally, it was time. Robert came to escort her to the side entrance of the hall. Through the partially opened door, Maria could see the crowd, elegantly dressed people at round tables, the stage illuminated with soft lighting, the Steinway gleaming at its center. "Ready?" Robert asked. Maria took a deep breath, thinking of her grandmother, of all the years when music had been absent from her life, of the unexpected second chance she'd been given. "Ready," she said, and stepped forward into the light. The bright lights momentarily blinded Maria as she stepped onto the stage. The applause was polite but curious. These people had come expecting a professional pianist, perhaps the one from New York who had originally been scheduled. Instead, they were seeing a middle-aged woman with gray-streaked hair, someone who looked like she might be anyone's neighbor or colleague. Maria walked carefully to the piano, conscious of her dress, the unfamiliar shoes, the hundreds of eyes following her progress. She remembered Beth's instructions, acknowledged the audience before sitting. She turned and gave a small, nervous bow, then settled herself on the bench, adjusting its height the way Dr. Phillips had taught her. Robert had introduced her with a brief, tasteful explanation. A local resident with remarkable talent who had studied piano in her youth and recently reconnected with her passion for music. He had avoided mentioning her job at the center, for which Maria was grateful. Tonight wasn't about being the cleaning lady who could play piano. It was simply about the music. She looked out at the sea of faces. In the front row, she spotted Director Wilson and Dr. Phillips, both giving her encouraging nods. Beth stood at the back of the hall, clipboard still in hand but momentarily forgotten as she watched with wide eyes. The rest of the audience was a blur of expectant faces. Maria placed her hands on the keys and took a deep breath. The hall fell silent. She began with the Chopin Nocturne, the piece that had started this whole journey when Robert overheard her playing it that afternoon. The opening notes seemed to hang in the air, delicate and questioning. Maria closed her eyes briefly, letting the familiar melody guide her fingers. As she played, a strange calm settled over her. The weeks of intensive practice had embedded the music deep within her. Her fingers knew where to go even when her conscious mind was distracted by the audience. The lights, the importance of the occasion. She reached the middle section of the piece, where the melody becomes more complex, more emotional. Here Dr. Phillips had encouraged her to take slightly more time, to let each phrase breathe. She followed his advice, feeling the music swell and recede like waves. When the final notes of the nocturne faded away, there was a moment of perfect silence before the applause began, tentative at first, then growing stronger. Maria allowed herself a small smile as she adjusted her position for the Beethoven. The Moonlight Sonata was a more demanding piece, with its continuous triplet pattern and the challenge of making the melody sing above the accompaniment. Maria's hands had ached from practicing this piece, trying to perfect the balance between the parts. As she began to play, she thought of what Robert had told her about why he had stopped that first day, how the music had transported him somewhere else. She wanted to create that same feeling for this audience, to make them forget where they were, if only for a few minutes. The piece built slowly, gathering emotional intensity while remaining outwardly calm. Maria felt sweat forming on her brow under the stage lights, but she remained focused, thinking of her grandmother's words, "Let the music speak through you." When she finished the Beethoven, the applause was stronger, more confident. She saw a few people leaning toward each other, whispering comments, their expressions surprised and impressed. Maria took a moment to flex her hands and prepare for her final piece, the Mozart Sonata. This was the most technically demanding of the three, with its quick-scale passages and precise ornaments. It was also the piece where she had made the most mistakes during rehearsals. She began carefully, conscious of every note. But as the music progressed, something unexpected happened. Maria found herself thinking not about the technique or even the audience, but about joy. The simple joy of making music, of giving voice to something beautiful that had been created centuries ago, but could still speak to people's hearts today. Her fingers seemed to find a new lightness, dancing over the keys with a freedom she hadn't felt during any of the practice sessions. When she reached the passage that had given her trouble before, she played through it cleanly, almost effortlessly, as if the music itself were carrying her forward. By the time she reached the final movement, Maria was no longer nervous. She was exhilarated, fully present in a way she hadn't been for years. The music poured from her fingers, filling the hall with bright, joyful sounds. As she played the final triumphant chords, Maria felt a surge of emotion so strong it brought tears to her eyes. She had done it, not just played the notes correctly, but truly made music. After so many years of silence, she had found her voice again. The applause that followed was immediate and thunderous. People rose to their feet, clapping enthusiastically, their faces alight with genuine appreciation. Maria stood and bowed, her heart pounding, barely able to believe the response. Robert came forward with a bouquet of flowers, beaming with pride. As he handed her the bouquet, he leaned close and whispered, "I told you it was a gift worth sharing." Maria bowed again, overwhelmed by the continued applause. She had never experienced anything like this. The energy of hundreds of people, all responding to something she had created with just her hands and a piano. As she left the stage, still dazed, she was met by a small crowd of people waiting to congratulate her. Beth was there, her professional composure abandoned as she hugged Maria impulsively. "That was incredible," she exclaimed. "Everyone is talking about you. The director of the symphony orchestra wants to meet you, and there's a reporter from the newspaper who's hoping for a few words." Maria nodded, trying to process it all. Dr. Phillips approached, his usual reserve softened by a genuine smile. "Magnificently done," he said, clasping her hand. "You played with both technical skill and emotional truth, a rare combination, and the Mozart particularly showed real musicianship." "Thank you for your help," Maria said, meaning it deeply. "I couldn't have done this without your guidance." "Oh, I merely pointed the way," Dr. Phillips replied. "The music was in you all along." The next hour passed in a blur as Maria met what seemed like dozens of people, arts patrons, music lovers, even a few professional musicians who had attended the gala. Everyone had questions about her background, her training, her plans for the future. She answered as best she could, still processing the reality of what had happened. The most surprising conversation came when the director of the city's symphony orchestra, a tall woman with a commanding presence, offered Maria a startling opportunity. "We have a community outreach program that brings music to schools and community centers," she explained. "We need pianists who can connect with audiences, who can make classical music accessible and meaningful. Would you be interested in participating occasionally?" Maria blinked in surprise. "You want me to play?" "Professionally. On a limited basis to start," the director clarified. "But yes, your performance tonight showed not just skill, but genuine communication. That's something we value highly." It was more than Maria had ever imagined. Not a fantasy of sudden stardom, but something real and meaningful. A chance to share music with others, especially with children who might not otherwise be exposed to it. "I would be honored," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion she felt. Later in the evening, when the formalities were over and guests were enjoying dessert and coffee, Maria slipped away from the crowd for a moment of quiet. She found herself back in the music room where everything had begun, its familiar space now dim and peaceful after the brightness of the main hall. She sat on a simple chair by the window, still wearing her elegant gown, still holding the bouquet Robert had given her. Through the open door, she could hear the distant sounds of the gala continuing: conversation, laughter, the clinking of glasses. Director Wilson found her there a few minutes later. He entered quietly, respecting her moment of solitude but clearly wanting to speak with her. "There you are," he said gently. "I wanted to thank you privately, Maria. Tonight has been the most successful gala we've ever held. The donations have exceeded our expectations by nearly 50%. "I'm glad," Maria said sincerely. "The music school deserves the support." Director Wilson nodded, then hesitated before continuing. "I also wanted to discuss your position here at the center." Maria's heart sank slightly. With all the rehearsals and preparation, she had neglected some of her usual cleaning duties. Perhaps there had been complaints. "I understand if you need to find someone more reliable," she began. "These past weeks have been unusual." No, Director Wilson interrupted, looking surprised. "That's not what I meant at all. I wanted to ask if you would consider a different role here." "A different role?" "We've been talking about expanding our music program for adults. People who played when they were younger but gave it up, or W.